Alright, so today on the Wonderful Lovely Gaming Jesus Rocks channel, I kind of have a few things that I'd like to show to you. Now, we're kind of go through the not really top 10 video games. It's more of a kind of like a history and comparison between PlayStation and Nintendo and Xbox, okay? Now, when we do get to the mobile section will be more towards the end of the testament of time. We'll only be talking about, we'll talk about a little bit about everything. So, in that notice, just let you guys know that some things I don't have prepared, at the moment's notice. But I can explain a little bit. So, so we're gonna do a kind of my thoughts on each era of system. Now, we're gonna start with, that going back to the Testament of the Times, looking at Nintendo Entertainment System, or looking at Nintendo NES, that was the game system that prevented us from the video game crash. Do you think there will be one imminent? I don't know if there will be one, but if you think there might be one coming, put that down in the comments, because, if that's a true testament, then, there's another one coming. It's because we're not doing so well. The next thing that's on that list that followed the Nintendo Entertainment System was the SNES. Now, I don't have pictures for any of these, but these were games you would find like Mario Bros, Super Mario Bros, Super Mario Bros. 3, kind of games like that, Donkey Kong, the original Donkey Kong, Final Fantasy 1, Final Fantasy 2, and Final Fantasy 3. If you are in the US, if you were over in Japan, it was 1 through 6. In that sense, NES was backwards compatible with NES. Then came the Nintendo 64. And the PlayStation came to be involved. So, let's talk about the, okay, so I don't have any pictures. I actually think I deleted them by mistake. So if you guys did see that red little blimp up here in this corner over here, that was because that's what used to be there. But we're going to kind of go through a testament of saying I know some of these things. I don't know a lot about each system, so bear with me. With the Nintendo 64, it was a disc cart. It wasn't really disc based. It was still cartridge based, but it was 64-bit. It was great system at the time for games like Banjo-Kazooie, GoldenEye, Super Mario Bros. Mario 64. Games that were great on that system. I enjoyed it. Like even Pokemon Stadium. I actually enjoyed a lot of those games from that system. I never really got into it too much. Mario Kart was another game on there too, if you guys want to indulge into games that were on there. I don't have an N64 yet. I've played it before. I've played it when it originally was out, in the sense of when the PlayStation 1 was out. I enjoyed that system very lovely. Enjoyed it. But it wasn't the best game I enjoyed. Wasn't the N64 for this generation. I actually enjoyed the PlayStation 1. Not because of, it was CDs or DVDs. It wasn't that it was able to handle more. It was able to handle more in storage than the N64 did. And it didn't have the notorious cartridge save on the N64 like you do on the PlayStation, that you could save your games, and in case if you did lose your system, you wouldn't lose your saves. If you would have lost your system and the cartridge in the same, thing because it got electrical shortage or whatever, it was most likely that you wouldn't lose it as badly on the PlayStation. Okay? But also in the PlayStation, if you want to talk about a testament to being that it's totally better, is that if you look at the Nintendo 64 and you take Final Fantasy 7, it would take 30 um swaps on the N64. It would cost about $1,000 for it, which would be, you know, horrible game production. You know, if it was stayed on Final Fantasy 7. Um, then it was, so they ported it over to the PlayStation and it only had 3 discs on it. If you talk about Final Fantasy 8, it would probably would, if that was on there, on the Nintendo 64, it would be such a large file game that you'd have to even change consistently. Like, it would be like, maybe like even more than 30 disc changes, maybe, in that sense. And that shows you that the discs were a lot more, better in handling. Now, Microsoft was still in the works at this time, but they weren't really getting into consoles. They were more like PCs at the time. And they still had some games like DOS games and stuff. It was still great, you know, but it was just wasn't my forte. I never really enjoyed those kinds of games at that age. There was maybe a few games, but it was maybe more when I was a kid. Um, in the next game, in the next era, I should say, came the PlayStation 2, GameCube, and Xbox. Now, a little thing about Xbox is that Xbox was originally going to be named Direct Xbox. And then they said, okay, it's Xbox, you know. Then they took off the Direct and just called it Xbox. They said that if you were an Xbox creator, they said that not too long ago, you are also a PC creator. So that means any games that you physically make on the Xbox, you can physically make on the PC. And that was true, in that sense. Now, you know, PC's still around, PC's still holding strong, in that sense. Then you have the games called games under, well, I shouldn't say Xbox. Then you had the PlayStation, who had some great, wonderful games, GameCube. All of them did have memory card capabilities, but not really. Not all of them, not really. You really didn't have, Xbox didn't really need memory cards at all. And that's true, because everything was stored. It was basically a laptop in a Xbox, basically. So it was pretty well thought of and pretty well made of. It had the Duke controller, big fat controller. I think that's a great controller. Even though that I have these small little hands, I still enjoyed it to this day. I think it's I think what Microsoft should really do is kind of say that they're not make it limited edition in the sense, but make it readily available to us, that we can use it via our Xbox One or Xbox 360. Just have that for, or make it not so limited, but make it that it's that if somebody wants this controller, they can just go and create them themselves, and make it an option on the Xbox One controller options when you create your own controller, so that it kind of feels that as though that those players who get the console will get the best out of the system, that they can enjoy it and not have to worry about the, you know, the small thing of a controller. Now, in that sense, but who knows? Let's get back a little bit to the PlayStation 2 and the PlayStation, Xbox, and GameCube era. Now, GameCube, by all means, GameCube was a great success. You had the small little discs. They were, you know, they were their own. It wasn't that bad of a system, but you still had these memory cards. You were able to have 4 slots on it. It was basically built like a cube, and you could carry it around with you. It was great. Great games were on it. I would actually say that it was one of the last of the best Nintendo systems out there at the moment. minus portable devices, but you know, we'll get into that in a later stage. Then we had the PlayStation 2. PlayStation 2, now I don't know much about these specs or anything, but I do know that the PlayStation 2, there was a, you had the big fat system, and then you had the slim. Now the fat had some problems. I wasn't able to play my PlayStation 1 games on it, but when my slim came around, I was able to play my slim. I was able to play certain games on that system that I couldn't play on the first one. So, kind of saying that that's bad on their part, on some companies. I can understand that, but when I couldn't play PlayStation 1, then I could say, you know, not good at all. Not great. Then, in that system, you still had memory cards, 8 MB. You still had to carry those memory card sticks around. The PlayStation 2 did require the fat system to play some games, because the originals, the Slim did not have any hard drive space, whereas it did if you had Final Fantasy 13, not Final Fantasy 13, Final Fantasy 11. You had to have the how can I put it this way? You had to have the hard drive in order to run the system. Now, PlayStation 2, not too long ago, maybe 2014, they maybe ended the cycle of the PlayStation, about 13, 14. The last game was a sports game. It expanded from PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, and PlayStation 4. So if you do want to play, if you do have PS2 and you don't really have a whole lot of games on that system, or next generation systems, or you just haven't gotten able to, you can still at least get some games for it. Now also on that system, you also had 2 ports, 2 regular controller ports, 2 USB ports, maybe 4 on the original, but you were able to still have the creative of DualShock. If you go through the first one, they've kept it the same since the beginning, since the very first time that they've released the DualShock controller. The first one, it didn't have the thumbsticks. The very first controller never had thumbsticks. They finally implemented that in the PlayStation 1 era. It wasn't very widely used for those thumbsticks. Then came it on the PS2, and they stuck with it since then. So it wasn't really, you know, that bad for the controller. There's some slight moderation, slight changes between the controllers and stuff. If you look at the PS2, you had to push a button. You had to push the button in to lift up the tray. So that was kind of good that you could lift up the tray. Same with the GameCube. You had 3 buttons to reset the system. You had the one to open it, the one to power, and the one to reset it. Whereas the PlayStation, all you had to do was just 1 button to open the disc tray and 1 to shut it off, or hold it to shut it off, and then 1 button to reset the system. It still had some internal clocking system, and stuff like that. Now, Xbox, you could open up the disc tray, and you would be able to do it in that way. You could store your game saves on the Xbox system, but you couldn't do that on the PS2 or nor the GameCube. The GameCube could play backwards compatible Game Boy games, Game Boy Advance games, stuff like that, if you had the little thing that would go under it, and then you had the little disc that would be able to play the GameCube games on the GameCube. Now let's go into the next era. Now this is kind of where the Xbox 360 comes in, the PS3, and the Wii. Now, those systems were great. Now, the PS3, the Xbox and the Wii were not Blu-ray compatible, as well as but the PS3 is. Now, it's not the best system between the 3. The PS3 came late in the cycle, a little bit, not too bad, but you still had the ability to still play for free on all of these, except for the Xbox, before the time of the PS3. with PS1, PS2, PS3. No, PS2 and PS3 were free to play online. Xbox 360, you still had to pay to play online. Wii was free to play online as well. The Wii used the motion controls, which was great, but it was a lot of shovelware. It wasn't really, a lot of the games weren't really thought of. There were a lot of good first party titles. There wasn't many third party that catched my eye. I'd prefer them on a Xbox or PlayStation. The PlayStation, the Xbox, there were a lot of variations with each system. The Wii had only 3 variations: the white, the blue, and the mini. The white was able to play GameCube games, the blue was not, and the mini had no Wi-Fi connectivity. So it was basically just a console like a PlayStation 1, basically. And it really sucked. You couldn't really watch Netflix, YouTube, or whatever. Then you get into the next game system. Well, not next era, but then we get into the Xbox 360. You still got the controller. It was still nice, great, wonderful. I would show you it if I was able to get up and go get it, but I don't want to. I'm not going to go. I don't want to have to worry about that. But that one had the very first, it had a rocky start. The console, I heard about this. A lot of people, I knew that the system was out and then. And it had the Red Ring of Death. Now, the Red Ring of Death basically allows you to, it would basically crash your system. And you wouldn't be able to do it. And you had to send it to Microsoft to get a new one. And, they sent it in to get it fixed. Some of them came back and never really got fixed. They did, but they would get the red ring in that sense. You also, some of these stuff lost, like the core, like the Xbox 360 core console. It lost the internet. All you could use is Ethernet and, how can I put it this way? Not Ethernet, but, yeah, it just had Ethernet connectivity. It was very small in core system. Didn't have much memory. The PS3, now on the other hand, the Xbox did get better as it went on. You could get up to 500 gigabytes in that system. You had, in that sense. You could still get access to wireless play if you got that little wireless adapter thing for it. In that sense. Then you had the PS3. Now the PS3 came in a little later than the other two. Now this was Sony's new invention, the Blu-ray. This is when Sony pioneered this invention and said, we're going to now make everything Blu-ray, we're going to make our console Blu-ray. So they decided to slap on a Blu-ray. It's basically was like a PS2, a little bit better, with Blu-ray slapped on it. You had the backwards compatible PS2 version of the PS3 that allows you to play PS3 games, PS2 and PS1. That's if you had the original, but it didn't do so well because you had the WiLOD. Sometimes you might get that, you might not, at least in that sense. But, true in testament, Xbox 360 was not backwards compatible with Xbox games. PS3 is backwards compatible with PS1. So if you have a PS1 sitting lying around, and you really want to get the next gen system of the PS3, or get the PS3, and you can go back and play those PS1 games. You can also play the PS2 games if you decided to get that little 40, 60, and 80 gigabyte system. If you got into later, there were different designs. The one design was that you had to basically push the power button on. You had the power, and then you had the eject where it ejected out of the system. But on the other hand, later on, another design was made that you could slide the disc tray open, and you would be able to. It was a little cheaper design, but it still was, in that sense, still a great system. I think that's the best one because in case your system does decide to crash and your disc gets stick inside the system, you can at least get out that game. In that sense. The game did support Blu-ray. It supported HDMI for both Xbox and PlayStation 3. Xbox 360 also as well. Did support composite cables as well as the Wii, but the Wii did not support HDMI. There's a lot of good games for them. Wasn't the best time to enjoy. Now, then here comes the next generation of consoles. Now, the next generation was the Wii U. Now, the Wii U, the PS4, and the Xbox One. Now, the Wii U came before the Xbox One and the PS4 came out, and it was a great system at the time, but it just didn't see much use in the system. It wasn't much. It wasn't up to par with Xbox and PlayStation. It wasn't up that par enough. And if you look at the core of that system, it flopped really badly. A lot of first-person titles, not much third-person in that sense. If we go into our next console, well, besides that was basically a Wii with the pad with it, and I saw it as a great game system. I didn't saw it as the best system out there, but it was still good. I loved Mario Kart 8. I loved a few of those games that were on there originally, and in that sense, you could also still be able to get your old games if you were able to do the Wii backwards compatibility with it. You could play Wii games. You could play the Wii U. If I personally am ever going to get an next Nintendo console, I'd personally get a Wii U. Just hear me out. I'd get a Wii U so that I can start collecting Wii and Wii U titles. It wouldn't be me collecting Nintendo titles, Nintendo Switch titles yet, because I feel like that collecting now for a Nintendo Wii U is going to be a lot easier now than it will be 20 years down the road, when everybody says, "Oh, that was a great console. I loved it as a child," and I said it was okay as a child, but I think I'm going to like it now because there's nostalgia for it. In that sense. The next system that I'd like to talk about is, now that still supported the Wii U nunchucks. You still had to have those in order to run the system. If you look at the next console that I'm going to talk about is the Xbox One. Now the Xbox One originally, I should say, came out with Blu-ray. They both supported Blu-ray. You had the Xbox One, the Xbox One S, and the Xbox One X, or short for, if you look at Xbox, it's actually an acronym for Xbox One X. Take the X, take the B, take the O, and take the X, and say, and take out, when you spell Xbox, take out the O and the X, and when you spell one, take out the N and E, and you got the Xbox. In that sense, Xbox One X. So it really works out for, makes it direct Xbox One or whatever, Xbox One X, but Xbox One doesn't support really in 4K, but it still is a great game system. They did implement the backwards compatibility with certain 385 titles of Xbox One, Xbox 360 games. They also did support Xbox backwards compatibility. Soon they will be able to have that capability. The Xbox One supported Blu-ray, Sony's thing, but it wasn't as powerful, nor was the Xbox One S. It just didn't quite see its true in time. But when they released the Xbox One X, over a little over a year ago, since last E3, not 2016 E3, not 2017, when they released that they were releasing a Project Scorpio. They were actually, it was the Xbox One X that recently got released, of announcement dates and whatever. It'll be Christmas time, I believe. It may be earlier than that. But that's the game console that supports 4K gaming. It's a great system. I would say Xbox One. I have played it. I would say, in that sense, I would enjoy that Xbox One. I'd also enjoy the PlayStation 4 as well, because PlayStation 4 does support the Blu-ray capabilities. They support, in that sense. It's got the best. I think the controller is better for my hands than the Xbox controller, but I like the Xbox for some of its line of library. Now, I'm going to say that I enjoy all of these systems, but which one do I prefer the most out of them all? Now, going back, now before we do, we're going to also talk about the Nintendo Switch. Now, I've only played very little of the Nintendo Switch. Very little. And very little of PlayStation 4 too, but I kind of figured, talking a little bit of history around here is kind of a good idea. Now, my verdict, the Nintendo, before we talk about the verdicts of each era, the PlayStation, no, not the PlayStation, but the the Nintendo Switch, basically is a tablet with Joy-Cons. That's all it is. And I actually think it's a great game system for mobile devices. And I think it's going to be a wonderful thing. Taking into consideration that it's gonna, I think that when the Nintendo 3DS starts going out, I think they're still going to keep the Nintendo Switch, and I think that Nintendo Switch is gonna. I think that they're saying that no, they're gonna still support the Nintendo 3DS when the Nintendo Switch is kind of the next portable console, really. If you look at the going through the list of verdicts, let's go in through the NES. NES, SNES are my verdicts to playing those. I haven't played any other consoles too much, in that sense. For the verdicts of the Sony PlayStation versus Nintendo 64, PlayStation wins this one. The next generation, Nintendo GameCube, PS2 or Xbox, PS2, Xbox, are really close. They're really close in this one, but I'd have to say the PlayStation 2, just because it has a large library. But say, hey, I actually enjoy a lot of these games. I will say, it's not about the hardware itself. It's about a little bit about the hardware, but it's also about where you play the games. I like to play my exclusive titles. I will pick up for each system. But if I'm going to play like a game for, say, let's say it's on the PlayStation, and let's say it's on the PlayStation 2, and it's on Xbox, and it's on GameCube, I would prefer the GameCube. I mean, not the GameCube, I would prefer the PlayStation over it. If it wasn't on any of those systems, I would prefer them in that way on their own consoles if it was exclusive. The next generation would be Wii, PlayStation, and Xbox. Now, most of you guys are going to be surprised that you think that the PlayStation's my all-time favorite fanboy. You guys are wrong. The Xbox 360, I actually prefer Xbox over PlayStation 3. The reason why that is because, yeah, I would say that I love Blu-ray. I love the quality of it, but I would rather prefer to play the PlayStation, the Xbox versions of the games, because, yeah, I have to pay to play online, but, I actually would enjoy that more, because I know that I'm supporting more support on the consoles themselves than supporting to getting more games and stuff like that. Helps out pretty well. Now, I will still support PC over them all, but you gotta have a little bit of all of them. So that's kind of that verdict. Now, if we go into the next generation. Now we are going to say Nintendo Switch, Xbox One, PS4. I'm actually don't have a true. I'm not going to say that this will change if I play a lot more on each of the consoles. Right now, Xbox One right now is my verdict, but I'm not 100% for sure on if I'm going to stay with that decision because I haven't played PlayStation 4 yet. I've played a little bit of Nintendo Switch. I'm not for sure if I want it yet, but let's get into now. I'm going to go in now. Let's jump back a little ways. Now let's go in and say let's talk about the portable devices. Now there's a lot of portable devices out there that I'm pretty sure that I'm not saying that Android is one of them. iOS is another. We got the Game Boy, we got the Nintendo 3DS out there, we got the PS Vita. But let's go and start with the Game Boy. Now, the Game Boy was originally made way back in like maybe early 90s. Early 90s. I'm not going to say 100% early 90s. It may have been late 80s, early 90s. But that system was black and white. It was a great system. I enjoyed it. For some of their games, I didn't play much of the system itself, but I had some couple of games from them. Then the next game came out. The next system was the Game Boy Color. It supported a lot of color stuff. It wasn't that I would say it wasn't the best, but it was a great system. I haven't played much of the Game Boy Color nor the Game Boy. Then I got into the Game Boy Advance. They started with that, and that was pretty well thought of. It wasn't. It had smaller cartridges. You could store them a little bit more better on it. You could play a little bit more. Battery life was probably maybe extended. It was basically you had the AB, the LR, and the the D-pad, and then you had the Nintendo Game Boy Advance SP, or it had the light backlit light. And then this started coming in with the Nintendo DS and the PSP. Now, Nintendo DS is a dual-screen system. Now, with the dual-screen system, it had basically one screen was touch and the other one was not. You could choose whether you wanted the Game Boy to be able to play with each other on that system, which screen you wanted it. Also, the other previous systems were backwards compatible with the Game Boy Advance. SP was backwards compatible with all the other ones, but not the Game Boy, not the DS. The DS was only backwards compatible with Game Boy Advance games, or cartridges that were small cartridge, not large cartridge. Also, the Nintendo DS was SD card size. You could be able to play cards on that through that, like Mario. A lot of the stuff that you would see normally on here was like things that were choice, like Mario was on here. You had Animal Crossing. You had Final Fantasy on here. And a few others, you know. Then you kind of had the staple of the PSP. Now the PSP is similar to the PlayStation, except without the L and R. With the L and R, it had one L. No, it had L. It had the left trigger and the right trigger. Then you had the normal buttons that you'd get for your controller, and then the is basically take the original PlayStation 1 controller and slap it together with a thumbstick at the real bottom of the screen, and then you had the select options at the bottom. That system was able to support Wi-Fi. Both of them were. That one is able to support UMD discs. Those were unique. They were expensive to make, but you could store it. You couldn't store data on your system too much. You had to have the those SanDisks. They're cheap now to put them into the PSP. They're cheap, great. You could hold as much. I would recommend that you at least have a 4 to 6 gigabyte SanDisk, 4 gigabyte or what, 4 to 8 gigabyte SanDisk, to store your games and stuff on it. The next, now that also did support surfing the web on it, whereas the Nintendo DS didn't support that as much. Until you got the Nintendo DSi and Nintendo DSi XL, that did kind of start supporting that. Then the PSP did support PlayStation 1 backwards compatible through the store only. It was also supported through the in that sense. It also did support DVDs, like movies on it, but it was really maybe you might have the movie and maybe a few setup stuff. Wasn't much, no special features or anything. But the PSP did see that it had 200 games on it, 200 PSP games, and I would like to own it. That would be my first one that I'd love to own, every single one, every single game, because it wouldn't be as bad as it'd be my first complete collection, in that sense. But it was not backwards compatible with any other systems. But you did have, there were 3 models to it. There was the PSP 1000, the PSP 2000, and the PSP 3000. I highly recommend at least 2000 or 3000. I wouldn't recommend going to PS 1000. It's a fatter system. It's a little fat system. They got it slimmer. It does support the back of it was where you put your discs in and stuff. It does support the a component to the system to component or to your TV. It also did support the well, how can I put it this way? It also supported the PS3. You could play crossplay with them, in that sense. With the PSP, I think there's one other thing that I was missing. Yes. The PSP was able to support music as well, but not the not the Nintendo DS. Was not able to support video. I still don't know about the next generation. Now let's go into the next set of systems. Now this, we're kind of getting dwindling down. This is going to be my last thing that I want to talk about. Is you have the PlayStation Vita, and you have the Nintendo 3DS. Now, and 2DS, if you want to put it that way. There's 3 systems there, but we're going to consider 3 and 2DS under the same family. If you check under the PSP Vita supported those cartridges like the Nintendo DS and Nintendo 3DS. The Nintendo Vita does not support backwards compatible UMD discs. It does support the Nintendo, how can I put it this way? It does support backwards compatibility via this PlayStation Store. Other things that it does support in the gameplay of the system, in lieu of the system, is that the PlayStation Vita was able to have support touchscreen, whereas it wasn't able to before. I did forget to mention that there was a PSP Go. Don't get that system. It was a cheap. It wasn't really a cheap system. It was more along the lines of it didn't support UMD, so you can only play on the go. It was really a dud system. Don't go buy it. I'm literally saying that if you want to check out more about history of these games, these systems, I'll put a link down in the description to a channel that you guys can go check out. His name is Metal Jesus Rocks. Yeah, or you can also check out a few other people out there. You can go find out on YouTube or out on the web and find all about these things. But the last systems that I'd like to talk about is Nintendo 3DS, the 3DS. Now, with the Vita, you can still support play between the Xbox, no, not the Xbox, the PS3 and the PS4 play. Now, it's a great system, for that. If you really want to have that now you don't have to go buy these to play them, to play it on the system. But you should if you are interested in that. There's also PlayStation TV. That's just more of PlayStation Vita and stuff like that. Just basic PS4 controller supportive. I'm not going to go into too much detail on that one. I don't know much about it, so. But not the PlayStation Vita. The PlayStation Vita did support 3 gigs, 3G. It was supported via AT&T on that end. In that sense. The other thing, the Nintendo 3DS now came out with the Nintendo 3DS, Nintendo 3DS XL, the new Nintendo 3DS XL, the Nintendo 2DS, and the new Nintendo 2DS XL. That's a lot of iterations in that generation. In lieu of it, it was able to support backwards compatible Nintendo DS games, but nothing else. It also did support the supportive of no memory cards, unlike the PSP Vita, which are expensive. So if you don't want to go buy expensive cartridges to store in your system, then you should be alright with that. Buying the Nintendo 3DS. Now the 3DS does support, just like the Nintendo 2DS, except it adds 3D to the game. That's all it is, and maybe a few hardware chain upgrades. Not much. If you do wanted to say the verdict between these systems, I'll actually say that the PSP is the best over the Nintendo DS. The only reason I'm saying that it's better than Nintendo DS is because I don't have to worry about. This is actually the only thing why I dislike Nintendo DS in ways, is that I cannot fathom looking at 2 screens. I like to say, okay, I like to stick to looking at. I like to stick to looking at 1 screen. In the next generation, I actually prefer the Nintendo. And I'm not gonna say I wouldn't know. I've never touched the PSP Vita. I never touched the Nintendo 3DS at all, so I wouldn't give a verdict on that. I haven't even played them. So, the next system, now the Nintendo Switch would come right in that era of line too, but I feel like it would be dishonest thing that I say the Nintendo Switch, I haven't touched it, so I wouldn't know if I would like it or not. I would say, at least go look around the YouTube, look around the world web, look at all these wonderful, lovely systems. There's even Sega systems out there. There's Atari systems, ColecoVisions, Atari Jaguar. There's Nintendo Virtual Boy. I didn't even talk about that. But hey, I didn't see much in the lieu of seeing that system. I don't know much about all these systems. I would say the only system I know much about is the PlayStation 1, Nintendo 64, Xbox. The generation of the PlayStation 1, 2, and 3 are the only ones, and in that era of those systems. I kind of know those a little more than I do with any other system. So, I hope you guys did enjoy this wonderful YouTube video. I know it's probably been taken a little longer. Maybe took 50 minutes to talk about all this. But I hope you guys did enjoy. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you guys later. Oh, one thing I do like to say, before I do end it, is, what is your favorite system? What was your favorite system of these eras? Was the PlayStation 1 better than the N64? What was your own? It's your own opinion. Everybody has their own title to their own opinion, but I would tell you this one thing, is that don't limit yourself to one generation. Don't limit yourself to systems because you're a PlayStation fanboy. I will say, I tend to draw to the PlayStation more than I tend to draw into the other systems. But I don't know what it is, but I tended to draw to the Xbox 360. I think it was just that it was a lot easier for me to go around and actually take everything and put it together. So I hope you guys did enjoy everything. So please do remember, like I said, please do like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you guys later.